We're we're reading on and on. With Honor David Thoreau. We're reading about the next step. Page 345. In the wake of Burns' arrest. Burns was a black guy, slave. Thoreau kept walking and journalizing, but soon an uneasy note emerged. Quote, "Is our life innocent enough?" He wondered. Do we live inhumanely towards man or beast, in thought or act? Good question. Is this current issue? Is it a current issue? The least needless injury to any creature was to that extent a suicide. He's saying the least injury to any creature is a suicide of ourselves, right? What peace or life can a murderer have? He had himself in mind. He had been collecting specimens for Agassiz, again while killing for science. Had not worried him in 1847. Now it did. He was collecting species samples for the botanists in Boston.
I know.
Now he thinks he's killing them. The inhumanity of science concerns me, as when I am tempted to kill a rare snake, that I may ascertain its species. I feel that this is not the means of acquiring true knowledge. Interesting point. Next day, the storm broke. Quote, I see the courthouse full of armed men holding prisoner and trying a man to find out if he is not really a slave. It is really the trial of Massachusetts. Every moment that she hesitates to set this man free, she is convicted. There's a lot of issues. From now through the end of June, the heat of politics scorched and withered his customary spring roll call of sadflies and eagles, hylodes and snipes and gooseberries, rhodoras and rainbow showers. 3 years before, when Thomas Sims was arrested, Thoreau pounded out pages of outrage but kept silent. Now he was again possessed, tucking a pencil under his pillow so he could vent the rage keeping him awake at night. This time he was ready to speak. All that June, Thoreau stoked the fires he had banked after Sims' arrest, pouring onto the pages the fresh fuel of his fury, pounding it all together into his inflammatory address. Quote, slavery in Massachusetts, unquote. This on July 4th, 1854, even as the printed sheets of Walden was being gathered and bound at Ticknor's and Fields, Thoreau was standing under the black-draped, upside-down American flag in the Harmony Grove Amphitheater in South Framingham, joining Sojourner Truth, Wendell Phillips, Moncur Conway, and William Lloyd Garrison. I remember the name Sojourner Truth, who set the tone at the end of his opening speech by holding up a copy of the United States Constitution, quote, that governeth with death and agreement with hell, unquote, and lighting it on fire. Wow, they're protesting. Do you think they could put the flag upside down and burn the Constitution? Well, they did. Do you approve of what Thoreau is doing? 2 jeers, hisses, groans, and howls of anger, Garrison held the burning Constitution aloft until the ashes singed his fingers. He held it until it singed his fingers.
He really burned the flag.
No, he burned the Constitution, United States Constitution.
A copy.
Apparently, I don't know, it was slavery. Thoreau is one of the last to speak, quote, words that burn, unquote. One newspaper called his speech, quote, again, it happens that the Boston courthouse is full of armed men holding prisoner and trying a man to find out if he is not really a slave. Does anyone think that justice or God awaits Mr. Loring's decision question? The choice was clear. Serve the law of the United States Constitution, on whose ashes Thoreau was treading as he spoke, or the higher law of God. Quote, not Edward G. God, but simple God. Who's Edward G. God? But simple God. Thoreau spoke and said, one observer, with such serene unconsciousness. What's serene unconsciousness? Of anything shocking in his words that he could say the unspeakable, since majority rule had produced such an obscenity, the moral path was clear. Quote, let the state dissolve her union with the slaveholder. Let each inhabitant of the state dissolve his union with her as long as she delays to do her duty. For a month, he told the crowd, he had lived with a profound sense of having suffered, quote, a vast and indefinite loss. What was it? Quote, at last it occurred to me that what I had lost was a country, unquote, in a nation that could send an innocent man, Anthony Burns, to the slavery all lives. Life itself is devalued, and freedom undoes and subverts everything. We dwell not in a state somewhere between heaven and hell, but now wholly within hell, in a landscape covered with ashes and cinders. Do you think that we're inappropriately inactive in protesting, and that there's a lot of problems in the world, and we're just reading Thoreau's book? Or does Thoreau's book in some way help?
Yeah, it's a good book. It helps. Maybe you would go to the Washington.
Does this book somehow help the current protest? But they put the flag upside down because it was upside down, and they suggested splitting the Union up into North and South. You could have slavery in the South and non-slavery in the North.
So the Civil War did not begin yet.
Why didn't they just split up and not have a war?
So where did the Civil War begin then?
Well, Civil War, remember, starts in 1860, I think, or 61, goes for 4 years or so. We're talking about 1854, so the war starts in about 5 years. So it's 5 years before the war. At the end of this address, Thoreau asked himself the terrible question. I walk towards one of our ponds, but what signifies the beauty of nature when men are base? Thoreau did not ask the rhetorical questions. His crisis realized his deepest fears, and his words expressed his deepest betrayal. They indict not merely his walks to Walden Pond, but his entire career as an artist, including Walden itself, the culminating work of his life. See, we're working for the freedom of animals and trees in the same way they've been made slaves. Do you think that cows and chickens are slaves? What signified the beauty of his book now, Walden too lay in ashes. Politics had turned nature into ruin. The remembrance of my country spoils my walk. My thoughts are murder to the state. Oh God, he should have just stayed in the woods. If he had gone to far north of Maine and got away from politics. Murder to involuntarily go plotting against her, but Thoreau would not go forward into night. In an extraordinary final turn, he willed himself toward hope. Quote, but it chanced the other day that I scented a white water lily. A season I had waited for had arrived. It is the emblem of purity. Pure to the eye, sweet to the sense, yet rooted in the, quote, the slime and muck of earth. The lily became his emblem for the, quote, the purity and courage that must yet be born of, quote, the sloth and vice of man, the decay of humanity, unquote. In offering his audience this American lotus flower, the sacred Buddhist emblem of enlightenment, he had found lighting his path of concord. Thoreau was offering them the core of his own being and belief and the story of his own redemption. The moral earthquake of Anthony Burns forced Thoreau to a moral reckoning, since his success and his serenity both demanded that he, quote, be at one with the universe, unquote. He must recognize that people live humanely only insofar as they injure no one, no other, not man, not moose, and not snake. Now he's concerned about the snakes. Thoreau turned his ethical imperative first to science, according to those whose dictates he must kill the animals he wished to know. Then to politics, according to whose laws he must turn a person into a slave, a human into a thing. His resolve bound science, politics, and nature together. The test of human virtue was allowing all beings, human and non-human alike, to flourish in their own ways. But tried by this severe test, no one wholly escapes indictment. We all have roots in the mud. Do we have roots in the mud? What about our plastic? And do we have plastic? Plastic. Do we take our own bag to the supermarket? The redemption Thoreau offered in the lily was his deepest belief. Purity and courage may be compounded of the foulest filth, even of sewer muck. The shit, though he used the word only in private, that spawned the Fugitive Slave Act. We must, quote, ask ourselves weekly, is our life innocent enough? Question. Do we live inhumanely towards man or beast, in thought or act? The answer, if honest, can never be unqualified. Humanity can never be innocent, but we can strive to be innocent enough. Do we try to be innocent enough? As for slavery and civility, they were not life at all. They could only decay and stink. Let the living bury them, he concluded, quote, even they are good for manure. We ended page 348. Slavery makes good manure.
Oh, slavery, not the slave.
Let the living bury them. As for slavery and civility, they are not life at all. They could only decay and stink. Let the living bury them, he concluded, even they are good for manure. Remember, there's manure that feeds the water lily. That's the white purity, the symbol of Buddhist enlightenment. We read about Buddhist enlightenment with the water lily, which can be fed with the manure of slavery.